and welcome to a new episode of the podcast Dive Into Reiki. Today, I'm very excited to have Liad Horowitz from Israel here. Thank you, Liad. Welcome. And for those of you who don't know Liad, he became a Reiki Master in 2001. He received a master's degree in East Asian Studies from the Tel Aviv University in Israel. His master thesis concentrates on the esoteric roots of Reiki. During his study, he compared and analyzed Reiki initiations from around the world to reveal a pattern apparent in all initiations. And you may have heard initiation as attunement or reiju according to your lineage. As a doctoral student writing his dissertation, he lives in Israel with his wife and 2 children, and he's actually in the process of moving, and he kindly gave us some time today. And he's also very active in the Israeli Reiki Association. So thank you so much for making the time to talk to me today.
Thank you, Nathalie. It's an absolute pleasure. And I'm excited and thankful to be here with you. Thank you.
Perfect. So I'm going to start, and people who are familiar with the podcast know, I always ask, what was your first contact with Reiki?
My first contact with Reiki actually happened before I actually learned Reiki. I was in high school, and the girl I was dating at the time studied Reiki with her stepfather, who was a Reiki master. And there was this one day where I had a very big stomach ache. And she said, well, I just learned this wonderful thing. Here, let me put my hand on your tummy and everything will be magically healed. And I remember that it felt really good. I loved the way it felt. I didn't feel like there was magic here and I was just magically healed from everything, but it felt right. It felt really nice. And after that, I wanted to do it myself. So that was the first time I kind of had a taste of Reiki. But then when I went to class with her stepfather, and from there it was immediately a click, huge click.
How beautiful, and how amazing that you got to know Reiki so young, right? Like learning all those tools that most of us discover like later in life, like, oh my God. So it's very beautiful.
I'm very lucky because there's the bigger part of my life is with Reiki than without Reiki. So I consider myself very lucky. I started immediately. I remember till today I remember the apartment where the Reiki 1 class was. I remember how everything was set up. I remember my first initiation till today, over 20 years. And it was in the car on the way back home that I already knew that I want to do this for the rest of my life. I want to teach this. I want to take the entire course, as they say, the entire path.
I love that. And you became a Reiki Master quite young. If I may get the day wrong because I'm dyslexic sometimes, but I believe at 19 years old.
18.
18. That's amazing.
Yeah. So at 18 years old, actually, I finished high school with Reiki. In Israel, you have a 3-year army service period. I went to the army with Reiki. Afterwards, I went to university with Reiki, and Reiki has been a major part of my life ever since. Looking back at over 20 years, I can honestly say that Reiki has become, well, it's gotten mixed into the foundations of who I am, and it's my compass for a lot of things.
And I love what you said, like you went to military school and Reiki was with you. Like often we think we need to leave everything we do and become a Reiki practitioner. And in our heads, probably military training, even though it was linked from the beginning of Reiki with people who were in the naval and all of that, But it's probably nowadays in 2022, like you think military and Reiki don't go together. But if you think of it like they do, like compassion, like it can go anywhere, right?
Yeah, I think that's one of the wonderful things about Reiki is that it doesn't compel you to first take a huge bag of beliefs and do's and don'ts for your personal life. And while I think one of the greatest points about Reiki really is that you will basically a lot of spiritual practices are based on monastic traditions. So they were usually the things that monks or clerics or people who were either elite or had enough money to spend their life not earning money or making food, but being in a monastery, they were the people who were able to learn and practice these practices that today are a lot of people practice. Reiki was created by working people for working people, by everyday kind of people like you and me, for everyday kind of people. So you can take it anywhere. That includes the army.
But I think it's great. I always have like politics and armies should have Reiki, and now they're teaching them meditation, right? Like it's everywhere, should be. And I think you said something beautiful, like it was created by working people for working people, like for people like us, like to people like us. And I think that is a beautiful, I could not rephrase that better. So I'm gonna leave it at that. And I know also you were very active getting a community of Reiki practitioners in Israel and some organizations. So I wanted, first of all, because I've never been to Israel, my sister and my mom have, and they loved it. But I'm always curious, how is the Reiki community in a different country, right?
Yeah, so actually Reiki in different countries and geographies and how this tradition or traditions change and acclimate to different geographies and local cultures is one of the main points in the doctoral thesis that I'm working on at the moment. And Israel will figure prominently in this work. Israel is a very interesting place of Reiki for many reasons. Where should we start? It's a
I
big
think
topic.
from your own experience a little bit, like when you were young, again, as a Reiki Master 18, like how was the experience and how has it evolved? Because when we think about 20 years ago, there were not that many Reiki practitioners in the world, but according to what you were mentioning, it was kind of thriving in Israel. And in the last 20 years, the information we have available has changed tremendously. They are like, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 times more lineages than they were. But also this information, ironically, has also grown exponentially, right?
Yeah. Okay. So, so Israel is very interesting. I would say that just an overview of the Reiki scene in Israel. So, Israel is a small country, less than 10 million in population. About a fifth or fourth of it is Arab, whether Arab Muslim or Arab Christian, which with less than 1% of Reiki masters or teachers in Israel would be from that community. It's almost non-existent there. There is another section which is ultra Orthodox or very Orthodox Jews, which also don't practice. So mainly we're talking about Reiki in Israel is among the Jewish, adult Jewish population, which is mainly, let's say, Western, in liberal in mind and thought. It has become, Reiki has come to Israel almost strictly from the post-Takata American style. It has remained so till today. The heyday of Reiki was in the late 90s and beginning of the 2000s. When it was booming in other places in the world as well. the story that you would hear in most places would be the master story told by Takata, that most people heard. That's the main narrative. It remains till today, 42 years after she has passed away. Still, the number of lineages in Israel, has not grown so much. The Japanese Reiki boom, or this opening to pre-Takata lineages coming from Japan, has kind of skipped the local scene mostly. And there are some of the Reiki practices and ways of thinking did get some local flavors as well, mainly based on Jewish thought and bringing it together along the lines again of what Takata did, connecting it with
Christianity,
with monotheistic thinking and Christianity. Along these lines, it got a local flavor, and some things that we do different because it's based on Jewish thinking. But that was the scene when I started, when I connected to it in the early 2000s. Reiki was everywhere. Even today, the word is very well known. Most non-practitioners have heard about it, and it kind of equals New Age or energetic or holistic healing. It's kind of one and the same. That kind of stuff. That thing that hippies do, those people who meditate and do yoga. Yeah, Reiki, I've heard of it. That's where Reiki is in people's minds. You could find some Reiki treatments, perhaps in some hospices or in some of the medical care, let's say medical
like hospitals, cancer.
Company could be giving some holistic treatments, sometimes with Reiki. It's part of the holistic New Age, new spiritual movement seen in Israel, which is on the growth, like in many countries in the West. When I met Reiki in the early 2000s, there were two organizations. Reiki had gotten so big and popular in Israel that following a visit by Phyllis Furumoto and some Reiki masters in Israel studying with names like William Rand and some European names, decided that Israel needed an association, and the Israeli Reiki Unity was born in response to the traditional Israeli Unity, the non-traditional Israeli Reiki Association was born, kind of to be the home for all the people who didn't fit into that mode of thought came into being. These, over the years, so Reiki reached its culmination somewhere in the 2000s, and then slowly petered out. And eventually, a few years ago, both these organizations and, let's say, the central hubs have disappeared.
Wow.
Which left a gap. And I came back from Japan after writing my thesis in 2015 and decided that a new home for Reiki practitioners should be built. So I established the Israeli Reiki Master community, thinking that the Reiki Masters are the beacons, usually the lineage bearers, or so, who take Reiki forward. I started the Israeli Reiki Master community, now counting over 300 Reiki Masters, and these are just Israeli Reiki Masters, which have, according to statistics that we're gathering, have supposedly taught over 50,000 students, Reiki people in Israel.
Yeah, and you're talking about countries, you said, of less than 10 million people. So that's huge.
Yeah. So we're definitely getting to the 1 or 2% that is estimated, for example, in the US, according to some. Yeah.
That is amazing. And also because for the people, so we're going to go over your background. Like, again, you actually felt the need to research the rules of Reiki, which is not what was happening in the scene in most countries either, right? So tell us a little bit, like, how did you decide, like, okay, what I got taught is not enough for me. There is something I want to find out more. How did that happen? And a little bit of how that research started to happen.
I remember exactly where it started. Those were magical moments, actually, within the Reiki Unity. So there was this move to get Reiki legislated in Israel and creating some sort of, under the overall association of integrative medicine, and trying to get it to become a very serious thing by the authorities and by the insurance companies, and to make Reiki something that was supervised. The Israeli Reiki Unity initiated Reiki Master meetings to see where the core is, where we understood that the different teachers teach differently, and some, and not all the contents were the same, but they wanted to understand, where do we all meet together? What is the core of Reiki? What does the Reiki Master need to have in his arsenal, in his curriculum, to get the stamp of approval, for example, or for a person who is to be registered as a Reiki practitioner, professional, healer, professional healer or practitioner of Reiki needs to have. Do they need to study physiology and anatomy? Do they need to study certain symbols? Yes, no. What is the curriculum? So there were meetings of sometimes even 30 Reiki masters meeting together to discuss what is the core. What's the core of Reiki 1 and Reiki 2, etc. And I was in those meetings because by the time I was already part of the committee of the Reiki Unity, and no one could agree on almost anything.
And that's
I was taught by my teacher that I studied with several teachers, but my first one was very clear that he taught me exactly the way his teacher taught him, going all the way back again, till the founder. This is exactly the way the founder taught. This is exactly the system, to the point. And here I am sitting with 30 Reiki masters, and everyone's got a different story. So obviously, there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle, and there's a lot of missing pieces. So, and at that point, I was just before going into university. So I decided that this became a major part. As I said, Reiki has been a compass. So this was one of the main reasons why, going to university, I decided to major in Asian studies, and especially Japan, study Japanese religions and spirituality, and really make studying Reiki in its place of origin my profession, my academic profession.
And it's amazing because you even went and practiced with the Gakkai, that original organization founded by Mikao Usui. And I know, like, they have like an NDA in it's like non-disclosure, whatever, like you cannot really talk about it. But how was that experience of going to Japan, learning Japanese, practicing the Gakkai, and how did it change your mind? Or kept it the same?
Still, no, I can say. I sometimes I still can't believe it, the luck that I had. My time in Japan changed my practice and the way that I view Reiki in many ways. It changed it from all those sorts of different angles, not just the, going on, visiting Usui Sensei's grave and paying respects, and going on Mount Kurama several times and receiving Reiju and initiations on Mount Kurama, and spending time with the Gakkai, with the presidents and with and Shinpiden and masters there, and interviewing them and asking them every single question, and getting initiated there and participating. And not just that, this was one. Obviously, you get a different perspective on Reiki. And that is something that I can recommend to everybody. Get different perspectives on Reiki. You've studied and you got one or two or three or how many pieces of a big puzzle, facets of a huge diamond that you've gotten. Get more. The more pieces you have, the more you can go up and you see a beautiful, never-ending picture. And with the best thing about a diamond, it's the different facets of it that give it the fire, the sparkle. And it's not just this practicing and coming in contact with many different, with very different ways of thinking about Reiki, because again, I started with Western traditions and post-Akatan traditions, and then going the other way and learning some Japanese traditions really changed my mind and broadened my view. But besides that, also the academic world really also opened my mind to looking at to actually collecting these different worldviews, respecting them. It's the fact that you can look at these other ways of perceiving and receiving Reiki with respect, with understanding. This is my brother and my sister. Nothing makes me better. Nothing makes my answers better than theirs. Is liberating.
And I think you said something incredibly important, right? Like if we still stuck, my Reiki is the right Reiki, then we don't get that multifaceted diamond. We just get a very plain 2D practice that has no depth. So I think not only by letting go of the need to be right, we actually get that richness of the practice. And we may not have to adopt everything. I see a lot of rituals that I respect them, but I have a very Germanic, lineal, simple way of practicing, and everything that fits into there, that fits with me. And some rituals are more elaborated. I cannot remember them. They stress me out. But for some people, they love the rituals. So I think also understanding we're all very different. I think it's a beautiful way, that diamond, a multifaceted way. And it brings sparkle.
And you mentioned that the main part of my work being in Japan and writing my thesis, besides the whole experience and of course immersing myself locally and in language and hopping between temples all over Japan and of course practicing with the Gakkai, was collecting and analyzing and comparing the initiation protocols. And that was
I'm just going to clarify for people, because some people call it initiation, other people call it attunement in the US, and then some lineages just call it Reiju. So I just sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to make sure so everybody understands it. And yes, please, because there is a lot of confusion about attunement. So go ahead. Sorry about interrupting.
Yeah, so yes, one, you could say that initiation equals attunement equals Reiju. That it's a way of saying it. Yes, Reiju and initiations slash attunements in the West can sometimes, or even different initiations or Western
Yeah.
initiations and attunements can vary in protocol deeply. There's still the same base, and when comparing them, and that's the great thing. That was the main liberating thing. When I started to put everything on the table and see them one by one and start analyzing, and a pattern started to emerge. And I always compare it to, like, if some alien from outside of Earth comes to Earth and sees you and me, for example, if it was not a very sophisticated one, I don't know how they got here, but not very sophisticated, might think that we are very different things, right? Look, I have glasses, this specimen does not. Well, we both have long hair. I have this color, that color, nose is totally different. So I have this on my shirt, you clearly do not. So very different things, not even going into male and female and everything, very different beings or even things, but his friends, the sophisticated aliens, would come to him and say, look, maybe they wear different clothes, or the color of their skin is different, or they have glasses, or their hair is done differently, or maybe no hair, but it's the same kind of animal. It's the same, it's basically because, look, one nose, both of these, two eyes, one mouth, two ears, hear, listen at least twice as much, 10 fingers usually. The anatomy is the same, okay? Something in the way that this thing is built from the inside is repeats itself even when the outside is different. The clothing, the
skin
hair,
color, hairstyle, yeah.
the ribbons.
Yes.
The same is for the Reiki initiation / attunement / Reiki. Within every specimen, within all of these rituals, or let's call it, it's a type of ritual, yeah. There is an anatomy. There is the same spine or type of organs that keep repeating themselves, maybe in different colors or ribbons or manifestations, but they still exist, which means that all of the initiations, and by the way, it's not, a lot of people say, wow, this is mind-boggling. No, because all of the initiations or attunements or reiju come from a single source. All of us eventually are are leaves and flowers of a tree with the same trunk, starting with a lineage started by a single person or person in his community, Usui Sensei, and the tradition that he started, and then the sub-traditions or myriad forms that came after. There is a base, and it started 100 years ago, not so long ago. So obviously there is still a core that connects us all and makes all of the initiations still have this core within, this anatomy, this pattern that keeps repeating. And understanding this pattern, once again, it liberates us from comparing and saying, this is better, this is not as good, this is, and creating some false hierarchies, instead of seeing that these are facets of a beautiful rainbow or a gem. And also, it it creates this respect and an understanding what makes Reiki happen. Okay, because the initiation is the gateway. It's what starts Reiki.
Absolutely. So if I will ask you, what are perhaps 2 or 3 things that are common to all initiations, are the core, what will those be?
One thing that is, okay, so out of respect, of course, to the initiation protocol itself and the different initiations and the culture of secrecy in Reiki, I will not go into what happens within the initiation, but I can say that yes, there is a clear pattern. By the way, it's funny that we're talking about it now. I will teach this pattern at actually in October, like in a webcast for Reiki Masters only, for an international website. I don't know if I can say this or not. Maybe
you can actually, and you're gonna have to send us the link so I can share it.
I'm part of a series in an international place called Reiki Home, where the different scholars of Reiki, we have something called Circle of Scholars. I completely recommend it. Once a month, we meet the Reiki scholars, the people who wrote theses on academic theses on Reiki, whether doctoral or master on Reiki, to discuss in front of open audience a specific topic. The last month, I talked about symbols and symbolism in Reiki, and then we discuss it academically, and then with the audience we have a live discussion, and I'll give a special workshop after being asked to talk about the actual anatomy of initiation. This is something I'm willing to open up, obviously, with trained Reiki Master. But I can say that this anatomy, that this pattern of several stages keeps repeating. So let's say, for example, that, I'll give an example. Let's say that during the initiation, okay, let's say that I would like to start by opening okay, I will. By opening up. No, I'll go back. I'm sorry.
Perhaps you can talk about state of mind, because for me,
okay, I can say, for example, that that before the initiation, usually there is a step of preparation for the master and for the initiate. This does not concern the initiation protocol. It concerns preparation. Preparations are usually for the Reiki Masters and not for the initiates, because most of the responsibility is placed on the Reiki Master. Because if someone calls and says, hey, I want to learn Reiki, I heard that it's really easy, and the Reiki Master says, okay, for 1 year, take a purification bath every day and come ready, he will have probably close to 0 attendees. Some Reiki Masters do give some exercises before, but at least the Reiki Master performs some sort of preparations on himself to help him be a better conduit for Reiki, or I would say, in other words, become Reiki in better and more effective way towards the moment of the initiation. Okay, so this is something that repeats. Some Reiki Masters would teach their their master initiates not to eat meat a few days before the initiation. Some would perform all sorts of meditations, special purifying or energizing meditations with symbols or not symbols. This is something that repeats itself. This could be a good example of something that happens outside the initiation, but we see it repeating almost in every tradition.
Yeah. And I think I will add also, like, for me, and I haven't done the study you have, but at the end, a little bit from my strategy, you can have different movement to bring the mind, body together and create the space that you want. But at the end, what is also common is really that state of mind of dropping the ego and allowing that light to shine and have the student take whatever they need, right? So sometimes it may last 10 minutes, some people slap, some people blow, some people put the tongue on the whatever they want. But at the end, it's really like, it's the state of mind we perform this ritual that is also very common or should be common.
Yeah. So let's say I want, again, thinking from a ritual master angle, from someone who is creating a ritual to make some effect based on a story, on a narrative, on a capability that they want to pass on. So let's say that I want to plant a certain capability, a certain something into a person by opening them up. Okay, so I could say, okay, stand behind the initiate and do a motion like this behind them. Another person would say, okay, stand behind them and imagine that a great light, by the way, I'm not saying things that are part of...
No, the same way I did. Like, we could say...
Imagine something going from above and entering. Another one would say, take an egg, put it on the head and go and let it drip. It doesn't matter. These are different actions, but the rationale, the ritual rationale behind them, the meaning behind them is the same, is exactly the same. So this was the meaning that I was trying to capture. And the meaning remains between the initiations.
And I love you say that, because more and more I'm saying, like, people offering initiations that says will allow for more, they are more powerful than others, or we allow for a different power. And I think there is a lot of confusion. At the end, the meaning is the same, the ritual may differ, right? So that, I think, is something very important that we can rescue, again, without saying any secrets, right? And then I always love this story. I think someone told me about, like, there is a very advanced monk who has to initiate the other monk. And this other monk has been waiting forever. And then they're in the desert, and finally that little monk is ready. But obviously they're in the desert, they have nothing, they cannot do the whole everyday ritual. And the student has no offering. So the student pees, which is his only offering, the water in his body in the desert, which is actually meaningful. And then the higher monk has nothing. So he takes his shoes and he slaps the student on the head. And then the student is enlightened, right? The meaning were the same. Obviously, do not slap your Reiki student with a shoe. Do not pee in front of your teacher. But when we're ready, we are ready, right? And I think, obviously, we're all... If you have the link to the Circle of Scholar, and people can join, because I know Reiki Homes, sometimes I volunteer or support them. And I think they're going to do also a drive to get a little bit of funds to be able to expand more. So I'm happy to share that link so people can get all the details. But I think the conclusion is, as you say, the meaning is the same, right?
Meaning.
And
I don't think I do not. So the main conclusion here is that the meaning and the status is the same. The different Reiki initiations are eventually an outcome of one initiation that is reborn in different forms, but is still there in every form. I do not want to confuse. There can be a hierarchy, not a hierarchy. Some initiations can be more effective or meaningful, but not based on tradition or based on the protocol, or, you know, my initiation is better than yours, sort of things. No, they can be better or more meaningful because the person who does them is a person whose capacity is bigger, because as a Reiki master and practitioner, they practice every day, so they are better at becoming Reiki, at manifesting and helping bring this for the initiate at that moment, and vice versa as well, for the initiate themselves being in this moment that is meaningful. And, you know, some days you can let go of your mind and your thoughts and you asking, oh, what is going on right now? And sometimes you're more in the zone during meditation or practice or an initiation, sometimes less. These are the places where an initiation can really differ between the capacity of the Reiki master by their practice, by their everyday practice of Reiki, and being a person who is Reiki in their lives, and for their students. That's one. And for the student to give this the space to enter into their mind, body, heart, life. This is where the difference is.
And that is a super important explanation. And I will not do it because you said it beautifully and perfectly. So I'm not going to touch it. And I really appreciate that you share that with us. I have a last question, and it's a very simple question. And today you actually get to choose. You can either share a big oops, something that happened that, again, like we call them lately teachable lessons that may look like a mistake, but it was a big lesson. Or you can share just one simple tip for people to deepen their Reiki practice. So today you get to choose.
Okay. I think that based on the line of what we said, I'll go with a teachable moment.
You're making me very happy. I love those.
Because I've done a lot of mistakes, and I think that there's a lot to learn from this particular mistake, or oops, I don't know if it's a mistake, to say this oops in regards to what I've said earlier. There was, on one of my trips to Japan, following my research, actually on my first trip to Japan, I was visiting just so that I don't connect it perhaps with anyone or anything, I will say a certain temple, important temple in Japan with important link to Reiki and its founders. And during this visit, I reached the place and I paid my respects, and I walked around, and eventually, besides, you know, when I say pay my respects, I mean be a Reiki person there, right? Respect the place, you know, come as a Reiki person, which I did for quite a while. But I also remembered that I am a scholar, or writing my thesis, or wanting to write my thesis on Reiki, and I came all the way to Japan, and I'm in this place, right? Here's the temple, right? Here's the place. I couldn't find anyone to talk to, like from the people of the temple, like a priest or someone to talk to. And I wanted to ask some questions, and I knew that I wasn't going to go back there. I was there for just a short span of time for that trip. And I decided after making a few circles go inside. I went inside the temple. I literally went there. I opened the door and started knocking on doors, trying to find someone to talk to. Again, I went all the way from, Japan and Israel are, other sides of the world in many different ways, and it costs a lot of money to get there. And God knows when I'm going to be back in Japan. So I started knocking on doors, and eventually I found someone, and I started. My Japanese wasn't so good back then, but it was good enough to try and explain what I was trying to do. And please help me out. I'm trying to write about this and that. Eventually, the person I was talking to looked at me and said, please go away. Now, I cannot stress enough how much in Japan, it's not something that you don't go to a person and so strictly and severely get the hell out. So I was, but that's what they told me. I was, what I was doesn't matter, but it was very teaching. Later, I was talking with my supervisor, and she explained to me that, well, first of all, I scared the hell out of her. It doesn't go like that, and that's the teaching thing. So sometimes we think that if we knock on enough doors and demanding the answers, whether by taking another class or learning from this teacher or that special Reiki, special initiation, special lineage, this thing or that thing, by paying enough money or by demanding enough that we will get the answers that we want, that we deserve by the merit of the fact that we want it now, or that we paid money, or that we went all that way. And sometimes these things take time. Sometimes they're not a product of banging on doors as hard as you can. It's a product of practice, of patience. And it actually answers both the questions and also what I was speaking earlier about respect. The respect to initiation and the initiations and to Reiki and to different traditions. Eventually, it is Reiki. And eventually, it's in the practice, in sitting and immersing ourselves like a tea bag into Reiki and into the practice, the way we know it. Okay, there are many different ways to do it, with lay on hands and with meditation and with repeating the precepts daily and with receiving initiations on a regular basis and with being part of a community and with using mantras or symbols, all sorts of practices, but nothing, no matter how much you bang or how much you go to more learning, nothing replaces sitting and practicing and taking the time with it. And this is where you get a lot of becoming Reiki.
I think, again, you said something very important, and I love that lesson. And also I love that it came such literal way, right? The knocking on door, like it has such a great image. So I'm going to finish the interview with the drawing. So we had a talk, and I know we cannot talk very much about the process of initiation, but there is that sense of light and planting the seed of light so people can find their own light, right? And that, again, is not really disclosing anything surprising. And so I did actually a drawing about a planting. And this is Reiki, and I love it because, again, you plant into the layers of very earth into the body, right? Because we always forget the importance of the body. And this woman who's actually a little bit bigger than usually is because I was thinking of fecundity, of like really creating, and then through practice, this blooming of the practice and going into heaven. So thank you so much. And I will wait until you have your new address to send this to you. But thank you so much for the interview.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. This was an utter pleasure. I feel like we scratched the surface a little bit.
Me too. I feel like I want to talk to you 2-3 hours, but we probably will do a follow-up of one time because we literally just got to know you. But I'm really grateful. And again, if you have that information about those telecasts, I'm always happy to promote. This is not about me. This platform is to share the knowledge. So whatever resource is great for people to deepen the knowledge attunement, please, we'll be sharing it in the podcast notes. It will be my utterly happiness to do so.
Happily. Thank you very much. First of all, I'm truly honored and I'm so thankful for this invitation and this wonderful time and this wonderful talk. And I encourage anyone who's listening to check out Reiki Home. Again, this is volunteer work to spread the beauty and the information and the wonders of Reiki. And there are ways to contribute scholarships for people around the world who are of less means to participate or are in war-stricken places, to help us, to help people from around the world join, to help us with translation and all of these things to broaden this light of Reiki and the information and the knowledge to keep on shining the light of Reiki.
Thank you so
much. All of us.
And Liad, you and I are now connected, so you won't escape probably a follow interview next year. So be prepared and to be harassed and like, give me more information. It's a pleasure. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Nathalie. It was a pleasure. Thank you very much.